Good morning. Today is the last stop on New Jersey's Underground Railroad as we travel to Paterson, New Jersey, to explore an interracial collaboration that supported flights of freedom. We also reflect on this final stop, the power of all the routes, the safe houses and monuments of our state's Underground Railroad. The city of Paterson in the 1840s was the largest and first planned industrial city in the United States. Famous for the Great Falls Historic District and cherry blossoms, little was known of the city's Underground Railroad activities. And it would not be until the 1990s that the recognition of the Underground Railroad in Paterson and the role of two men, Josiah Huntoon and William Van Rensselaer, would be identified and commemorated. Josiah Huntoon, born in 1813, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in Paterson and owner of the Excelsior Coffee and Spice Factory. His home was on the grounds of what is presently the Passaic County Community College. William Van Rensselaer was born in 1836 in Spring Valley, New York, to free Blacks. Josiah Huntoon served as William's mentor and paid for his education in Canada, and William worked with Josiah at the Excelsior Coffee and Spice Factory. Now, these two men had a deep friendship, despite the age difference, the power differential of boss and worker, and the fact that one was Black and the other was white. Records show that the older Huntoon gave William Van Rensselaer a house for a wedding gift in 1864. Huntoon's Excelsior Coffee and Spice Factory operated as a business during the day and a safe house at night, an important stop on the Underground Railroad to Canada. While many Blacks escaped to the northern states, a complete freedom route took some to the refuge of Canada, where British authorities refused extradition of fleeing enslaved people back to the United States. In 1995, a proposal to build a monument to pay tribute to the courageous acts of Josiah and William was passed, and the monument was completed 19 years later in 2014. Acclaimed African-American sculptor and architect Ed Dwight designed the monument. The center sculpture consists of the two men standing together as those fleeing from slavery ran towards them. On either side of the sculpture, Dwight captures the movement of flight towards liberation in powerful murals. Let's listen to author Raucha Mayam speak about the difficulty she had in locating this monument. Paterson residents did not seem to know of it or its whereabouts, and Mayam wondered if this lack of knowledge was partly due to a painful identification with slavery that included sites of the Underground Railroad.
Caused confusion as to where it was, but there wasn't an address for this place. Now, the issue is that our people perish for lack of knowledge. We watched and observed those that were walking around in downtown, and certainly it's a place where the people need to be encouraged. It's a place where people need to embrace knowledge, and yet they have this monument of historical significance, but they knew nothing about it. I've heard people say that if people know, they'll do better. But the problem is the knowledge is not disseminated enough. Our people don't have the knowledge that we need to have about our people. A lot of our people aren't interested in knowing our history because they have been taught about slavery. The schools push, this is slavery, and so they think that we were just slaves, and they don't want to listen or don't want to talk about, don't want to even acknowledge history. They don't like that part because they don't think it's a history of strength. I remember when I was teaching a group of sixth graders in North Carolina many years ago, I developed a unit based on who we were before slavery, who our ancestors were before slavery. And I taught them, and they researched and they read about all the kings and queens and the warriors. They were amazed.
Today, the location of the Huntoon Van Rensselaer Underground Railroad Monument has come into prominence and focus, with the Black Lives Matter mural beginning at the foot of this memorial. I want to say a word about all the memorials, the monuments, the hiding places, trapdoors throughout the state. They are the ones that we have located, but a fraction of Underground Railroad sites. I know we'll never find all the places that were involved, said Robert Craig, a historian with the New Jersey Office of Historic Preservation. It was a landscape stretching from one side of the state to another, and you had hundreds of people involved and maybe hundreds of properties. So, what remains standing and what has been identified and preserved provides physical testimony to all enslaved people who sought the most basic human right, their freedom. During this very time in 1841, a historical anti slavery document was presented to the legislature of New Jersey by the citizens of Paterson on, quote, behalf of the colored population of the state. It read in part, "We have petitioned our state rulers to repeal all the partial and all the unjust statutes that uphold slavery or impose inabilities on men for their color or descent. But these petitions have been treated with cold neglect, not, we charitably believe, because our statesmen approve of slavery, nor on the account of the interest of a few dozen slaveholders among us who are as well able to pay for the labor they require as the rest of us. Men of both parties who feel that slavery in New Jersey is wrong are afraid to act in relation to it, lest it jeopardizes the interests of their own party in the South. How can we allow mere questions of pecuniary advantage or of a party ascendancy to overshadow the great question of human rights?" So today, as our journey on New Jersey's Underground Railroad comes to an end, we honor the many enslaved peoples who passed through our state and on the way to freedom. We bow to the many free Blacks and white people who provided refuge, sanctuary, and safe passage for them to something better. And we acknowledge the tremendous personal sacrifice of enslaved and free Black persons who stood up against slavery in a state that was the last in the Union to abolish slavery. As Unitarian Universalists, we are able to hold both the pain of this chapter of the American story and current systemic racism with participating in the creation of a more perfect union. May it be so. Listen closely to the words of this spiritual guide my feet.
Good